My name is Michael. My name is Michael Carmichael, and I am the head of visual media at Sage, based here in Toronto. I've had over 20 years of experience working at Sage in developing print and digital products for higher ed and the academic market. And more recently, I've taken on a role to support our academic relations work in Canada with our Sage library publishing teams, and particularly around social sciences and behavioral sciences. And I'm not the main guest today. We have a star presenter. I'm really pleased to welcome Professor Steve Joordens from the University of Toronto, Scarborough campus, who is a passionate educator, researcher, innovator, and entrepreneur, all within the general area of online learning. In 2015, he was named a 3M National Teaching Fellow, which is the highest award for sustained and significant impact on higher education in Canada. In 2008, he won the National Technology Innovation Award for his co-creation of Peer Scholar, an education technology designed and researched specifically to provide a formal approach for the development and measurement of transferable skills. In addition to his teaching at the University of Toronto, he also offers massive online courses on Coursera, including an introductory psychology course, which now has over 350,000 registered students, which is incredible, and a second one on managing anxiety during COVID, for those who may have heard him on CBC Radio and other outlets talking about that, which has over 160,000 students enrolled. He has extensive experience teaching online and using educational technologies, and of course with video. Steve, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. A roll call of credentials and expertise, so we're all very grateful you could join us. Let me just start by just asking you, as an educator, how important is streaming video to you in your everyday teaching and practice?
Well, I guess I could say it this way. I recently had to upgrade my computer, and the most important thing to me was a powerful graphics card and a lot of RAM and stuff, because I spend so much time producing and using video. I really have found it to be the preferred method almost for me to have outreach with my class. It's a way to have presence in this, pandemic kind of world. And so, yeah, I use it extremely heavily, and we'll talk about a few of the different ways and goals that I have. And thank you for that introduction, by the way. I'm a Fredericton boy, I'm a New Brunswick boy, and it always strikes me as borderline humorous. I imagine some of my really good friends from childhood hearing some of this and getting a good laugh under their breath. So it always sounds very nice. Thank you.
Well, that's very, very modest of you, but we've worked together for a while, and I all those credentials have rung loud and clear with us in our working relationship. And welcome to others who are joining across the country, coast to coast, participating today. Okay, so the format today, use the chat box for comments and questions. We have a moderator in the Sage team who will be reading those and tracking those as they go. And the idea is we'll have a session first where, first of all, we're going to kick off with a Mentimeter interactive poll. So if you have cell phones and want to join along, please have them at the ready, because I'm going to bring that up in just a couple of minutes. And then the bulk of this talk is a conversation actually between Steve and I, an interview where we'll be diving into his teaching experiences with video, and then pulling out some best practices in his experience in using video. And then we'll have time at the end for live questions for Steve or I, or generally comments that people might raise based on the topics covered. So with that, I am going to share my screen, and hopefully everyone has a cell phone to hand so that they can join along and help me participate in our Mentimeter. So let me just get that to hand. Okay. So you will see at the top a course, an enrollment code, menti.com, and I actually have a black bar overseeing it. I can't see what the code is now, so if someone could put that in the chat box, I'd be grateful.
It's 15762683.
Thank you, Steve. So we'll give it a minute or so, and then we'll dive into the first question, which is how often have you used video in course teaching in the past 12 months? So hopefully we'll have some people come online and join in. Don't be shy. We have 3. Any other participants want to come online? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Very often is.
So Frances votes all the time. She just doesn't have her phone.
It looks like very often. So in every class, very often, occasionally, infrequently, or not at all in the last 12 months. Of course, we've been locked down and challenged and of course needing to do more virtual teaching. So there's a firm bias there, but I'll give it a minute on this, see if anyone else wants to join in.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to ask how often you used it prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, that would have been a good, maybe a better question.
Oh, good.
We got more people. Yeah. Okay, anyone else want to come in? Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question, and we will hopefully, and you can join in at any time if you haven't yet got access to a phone or you're just coming online. The next question, for those that have used video in the last 12 months, what types of video have you used? So have you used feature films, documentaries, how-to videos, tutorials, so to speak, demonstration videos kind of showing skill or something in action, animations, lecture capture videos, or other? I think you can put multiple options on this. And what have we got coming online? So we've got lecture capture. Interesting. How-to videos, tutorials coming up. Demonstration. Okay. I think we have 6 players, so we'll move on. All right. And again, for those that have used video, why did you use this video content? And for those that are joining this webinar, I see some entering the waiting room. We're in a live Mentimeter. So if you have your phone to hand and you want to join in, please do. The code is on the screen at the top. And we're just asking some questions at the moment about video use and experience over the last 12 months. So for those that have, why did you use this video content? Was it to help bridge theory and practice or give alternative viewpoints, show different perspectives? Was it to help provide the class material asynchronously? Perhaps it was to increase digital literacy as a sort of a key outcome from your class. Did you use video to develop certain skills? Did you want to incorporate video to increase engagement or participation in the course program overall, or are there other reasons besides? And anyone else who'd like to participate? Okay. All right, so actually supporting asynchronous instruction is coming out top, and there are a couple more votes coming in. Skills development, bridging theory and practice, really interesting findings coming through here. Okay, all right. So the next question, if you've seen positive impact on your students' engagement or learning because of video use, where did you see this development? So did you see increased learning performance, general classroom performance as a result of video, if you were able to track that? Do you think it fostered independent learning much better somehow? Did it have a positive impact on class attendance? And again, this might be anecdotal or through course surveys. Did you see greater engagement? Did people speak up more, or potentially engage in group assignments more? Have you heard about video's positive use through student satisfaction surveys, or are there other reasons besides? And again, I'm seeing more people joining this webinar. Welcome. Welcome to our first webinar on video in Canadian post-secondary education. We're just in a live poll on Mentimeter right now. Do join along if you have a cell phone to hand, where we're asking about your experiences of using video over the past 12 months. So again, we're seeing sort of a nice split between independent learning, classroom, learning and performance, greater class participation. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay. Okay, next question. To what extent do you agree that video can foster better independent learning and research in students? So we had a question before about whether, independent learning being an outcome. Do you agree with this? Do you agree that video in itself can help develop stronger independent learning and their own student research capability? Somewhat agree, people are saying. Somewhat agree. Quite popular response. I think we have just one more question after this. And again, for those just joining, if you have a cell phone to hand, you want to play along, we're going to come to an interview with Professor Steve Joordens very shortly, but just keen to get your own perspectives and experiences, first of all, around your video use in the classroom. Okay, somewhat agree. Okay, sort of not even a split vote on that one. Everyone seems to be somewhat agreeable, or in agreement rather, to that question about. Okay, so I think this is the last one. What would help you feel more confident in using video in future classroom teaching? Would it be kind of understanding what your students value in terms of video use, so how video can really help and support them? Do you think it's just being empowered more through better, best practice guidelines, how to use video more effectively as an instructor? Is it access to better video? Perhaps you don't have the strongest video in your library and you'd like more or better video. Do you feel you need more support from your institution, leadership, or technology and learning support guidance? Or is it down to vendors and publishers like ourselves at Sage? Do you need more support from us about video and the importance of video, or even the efficacy of using video? That's great. Well, some great response. So lots of really strong indicators towards best practice for instructors, which is very useful to see, because hopefully we're going to be able to give you some of that in the next half an hour or so. So that's great. Okay, so that's the end of our poll. I'll stop sharing, and I will try and download and post the results of that poll into this webinar so that people can see that as we're going along. Steve, very first of all, reflections on some of those findings. Any early reflections on that?
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things I think that we'll talk about today is that we've been saying, hey, can video do this? But there are so many different goals you can reach through video, and some of them are very different. So one thing I'll just throw out there that we'll probably talk about a little bit is there could be the videos that you produce or you find to give to students to enhance their learning. There can also be the possibility of asking them to create video content in their assignments and activities, which is something I do quite a bit too. And I think that in that case, the video has a completely different kind of mojo. So there's different ways of talking about this, different angles to consider it. And I think that's what we're going to have fun doing today.
Yes, we will. Well, let's dive into it. Well, let's focus a bit on your own experiences, because I think that experience is vast with all the online teaching you're doing, and I think the group here might really value some of that wisdom. So, just from professional experience, what is it that you value about the use of video in your class teaching? Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing I have to say that's not pedagogical to an extent, but that's scalability. When you do work on things like MOOCs, these massive open online courses, you have the potential to reach hundreds of thousands of students. And with asynchronous video, of course, you can do that. People are still watching videos I created 4 years ago and emailing me like I created it yesterday, saying nice things. So you can deal with large numbers, you can deal with large times. But that's not sort of the core reason. That's just a good mobilizer. A lot of it is, for me, is humanization, is just trying, especially in this pandemic world, trying to make it seem like we are together in some way and that we are human beings. And so I think by conveying ourselves through video, we can, I even get questions like, oh, where is it? Over here. But my Formula One car in the background, who is Jacques Villeneuve, by the way. But this idea of sort of letting people into our homes and letting our students into our homes and seeing a little bit of our life when the grandchildren come and give us a hug and stuff like that, that's something we would have never had in our classroom before. But I think it really humanizes us, makes us seem like real people, and it's very much sitting in the world where the students live. So I think from that perspective, they're happy to watch a video. They're not so happy to read. Hey, none of us love reading, right? I mean, we do it, but it's not like, clicking a video is so much easier, having someone speak to them. But it also affords a sort of flexibility. So I think the first thing I'd like to throw out there, and I'll just give you a sense of this through a quick little share here, is I use something called TopEd, an edtech platform, to deliver my course. But what it allows me to do is embed videos right in with the readings as they're going through. And so essentially it's like a reading club we have. We're going through the textbook together, and then every now and then I show up in a video like this, and I start talking to my students about,
hey, how you doing? Welcome
something
to chapter
just
5.
give you a sense of it.
So, again, lest anybody be confused, we're skipping chapter 4.
So again, just having a little bit of that right in, and what that allows me to do is to create shorter lectures. So these were, 20 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. Like in a classroom, we go in and we talk for an hour at least. Why do we do that? Well, because we have the room for an hour. And so you have to use that whole hour. An hour is probably too much for the average student. You're probably covering too much content for them to remember well and to structure. But if they can get a little 20-minute hit and think about that and walk away and come back and get another little 20-minute hit a little later in the textbook, I'm trying to find the next little video where I show up. But this is a nice way of kind of interspersing you, and you're right there with them while they're learning. So I've liked that flexibility a lot. And in fact, I'll say one of the dilemmas I'm going to face post-pandemic is, do I go back to lecturing for an hour rather than these shorter lectures that I know students have loved on video, but I also know they love that human interaction. So that's going to be one of the challenges I have post-pandemic, is to figure that out.
Yeah, I love this humanizing piece you mentioned, the quality of humanizing, bringing the classroom closer together, whether you're virtually sort of separated by a screen or not. And I guess that relates to the next question I have, which is I was asking the question in the poll about the course reasons or context for using video. What about in your own experience? Is the increased humanization one big component of that? And what else perhaps besides that did you perhaps decide to find video?
Yeah. So that's one of the sort of things I have in mind when I use it. And let me just be a little more clear about how I'd use that beyond humanizing ourselves, because there's obviously humanizing ourselves. But another example is in my class, and I should, by the way, I don't know, give you context. My normal small class is 1,800 students. So it's relatively large as well. So I use a lot of technology, but I still try to do a lot of deep learning things. And one of the things we have at the end of every course is a work integrated learning activity. And I know 1,800 students, but I've got a way to make it work. But they're always working on a project that connects with some community issue. So this term, for example, we're working around the homeless population, and the students will ultimately create videos that, well, they'll create anything they want. They'll create public service announcements to try to give the homeless population a voice, to try to get some messaging out there to the general public. When I do something like this, we're always working with an organization. And I love to have a video interview, not so different from what Michael and I are doing now, where I talk to them about what they do in their jobs and what it's like, what challenges they face, how much they work in groups. So it allows me to highlight critical thinking and critical and creative thought and collaboration. They all endorse how much they do that. But more than that, it puts a face to this project. So students get to see these people who are, in this case, really passionate about helping homeless individuals and whose job it is to do that. And once they see it and once they hear about the challenge, and then I say, hey guys, we can help these people. We can create some resources that could be helpful to them. They want to. So that humanization there isn't just, oh, I kind of know who my prof is. It's much more of a connection to the issue, and that helps with their engagement and really digs them in. So I think the humanization thing is cool, but certainly not the only reason. I mean, we can give a couple. Let me, I think this might be a Sage video itself, but just a short little one to make a point here. Let's watch just
called diffusion of responsibility. In other words, if I'm the only person who witnesses an emergency event, I'm going to be much more likely.
So notice she's just speaking, but as she's speaking, we have this animation here that is expressing what she is saying, but in a visual way. So you're hearing the auditory words, but your visual centers of your brain are getting with that images that go along. Let's just watch a little more of that.
Go in and help because it's only me. However, if there's 5 or 4 or 37 other people around, I'm going to be less likely to dial a phone number to call an emergency service.
So a very simple kind of animation, but what this creates is something we call a dual code. So that same information that the students are getting, they are now representing linguistically in terms of the words they're hearing, but also visually in terms of the images. And when these two kind of converge to tell that same story, that story will become better remembered, more memorable. It'll sink in more in the first place, and it will be retained better. So very often, that's a notion. I think we might have an example that I did with Sage at some point here as well, just to make that same point.
Your attention is drawn to it. So in fact, let me show you a few examples of this. Here's the first one.
Okay, so I was just showing that your attention is pulled to that thing when it just pops up, and in other ones I show it's different. But again, this now has the ability to take some point you're making that is sort of a theoretical point. You could say, trust me, when something just appears, it grabs your eye. But if you instead do it, they feel it. And that's what video allows you to do, is say, hey, let me show you. And you show it to them. Now that point is something real. It's something they've experienced. And that sort of doesn't humanize the point you're making, but it certainly, brings it out to the foreground with a consistency that's a lot stronger. So we can use the abilities that video give us to really kind of communicate points in a clearer way and in a way that will be more appealing to the brain, because the brain likes to see these convergent forms of stimulation come together.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and thanks for showing the examples. And you used a couple of really interesting terms there, like dual coding and otherwise. And we've actually had a question in the chat box, which I wouldn't mind bringing out now from Francis, which is about research that might underpin some of this thinking. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Is there anything around sort of theories of multimedia learning or otherwise that's sort of sitting underneath this that perhaps we could recommend or point people towards to give them some grounding for talking to some colleagues at their institution?
Yeah, so there's certainly, it depends sort of how deep you want to go in terms of the research support. So a lot of the support for this comes from basic phenomenon in cognitive psychology. So, I mean, I'll just mention three of those that relate to things that we've talked about so far. I made the argument to you a moment ago that an hour lecture might contain too much information. We know from cognitive psychology that a person can sort of think in their mind about, there's this famous study called the magic number 7 plus or minus 2. And the idea is we can kind of, within our conscious mind, we can hold about 7 items and think about them simultaneously. And if you imagine your average 1 hour lecture, how many new things are you introducing to the student in that hour? I'm betting it's much more than 7. And so you're getting to a point where you're exceeding their capacity. And so one of the things we often hear about video is, keep it short, which is true, but it's not so much keep it short. Like if it's engaging, we can watch, I saw a Tolkien book behind somebody's bookshelf there a moment ago. We can watch The Lord of the Rings, a 3-hour movie. And it's not like young people are going, oh, I'm sorry, I can't attend that long. This is terrible. No, if it's engaging and fascinating, they can attend. But how much will they remember? And so that's why I like short videos. If you create them engaging, they don't have to be 2 minutes or 3 minutes. That's great. They can be 15 minutes. They can be 20. But if they're engaging, you can titrate things so that you can give them the amount of information that kind of works. The other couple of principles from cognitive psychology we can talk about is the one I mentioned just a moment ago, the dual coding. So we know a lot about that if very simple studies, like if you read people words and ask them to remember, or if you show them the words while you're reading them, then they remember them far better if they're seeing and hearing at the same time. So those sorts of things. And the other phenomenon that's really always related to videos is what we call cognitive load. If you're just speaking to somebody, and actually that last video would be a good example of cognitive load too. If you're just speaking to them and saying, imagine you're the only one and somebody needs your support. Well, okay, they're listening to you while they're trying to create this image. And then you say, but if there's lots of people around and now they're creating another image, if you are creating those images for them, you're making sure they have the right thoughts in mind. You're kind of, have some control over what the image is that's produced. But B, you're not asking them to generate that. And so they can really focus on what you're saying, and the visual representation can come along with that easier, giving them more resources left to focus on what you're saying. So there's that level of support we could talk about, getting right into the cognitive psychology. But there's also a lot of great sites. If you look around, this was one from Vanderbilt University that talks about effective educational videos and gives a whole lot of the references behind it. So again, talking about things like cognitive load, various other elements that can impact engagement. So this is the other thing about video. And I have to show you this one now. I have to pull this one out just to make this point. I'll give you a little bit of context, and I'll do this for a reason. So my wife and I were on our motorcycles, and we were just going up into Northern Ontario where we love to go, and we stopped for lunch for a break. And as we stopped for lunch, of course, we check our phones, see what's going on. And in our family chat, this pops up. So you saw an Ashley and Kinsley movie. This is Ashley, 9 years old. This is Kinsley, 6 years old. I don't think Kinsley did a whole lot, to be honest. But Ashley, the 9-year-old, why did that start all over again? All right, that's a lot. So Ashley, the 9-year-old, did all of this without any help or any assistance. Okay, we won't go through the whole thing, but you get the idea. There's editing involved, there's text involved, there's background music, there's images. This is a 9-year-old. Why would a 9-year-old do that? Because this is engaging. This is the world in which they live. Things are shared on social medias through video and such. And they like it. They like to consume information this way. They find it really engaging. So it has a natural ability to kind of draw the eye and the mind. And what we'll maybe get to at some point too is look at how much, like Ashley then went on to create about 5 more when we praised her on this one, in very short order, by the way. They just used the Mac tool, the movie, I I want to call it iMac movie, iMovie, is that what it's called? Yeah, iMovie, yeah. So she just used iMovie for that. And what the other thing to kind of keep in mind of this is, what if we ask our students to create videos? That's something we'll talk about as well. That's very creative, and it has them using tools, digital tools. And as this 9-year-old shows you that had no help from anybody and no prompting from anybody, once you give them enough to get them going, they can really dive into this and learn a lot. So I think both as a consumer of information, video has some engagement properties, but as a producer, it can make them really get more engaged in the activities you give them, which I think is very powerful as well. So yeah, let me just mention, and I'll just, I'm going to go back things. So all I did was a search here for videos, education, best practices. You can find a whole bunch of great best practices. All of these create to evidence-based things. Some of the evidence-based stuff is very, I guess you'd call it primal, like the cognitive stuff, but some of it is directly also investigating the specific implementations. Let me give you just one example of that. One of the most boring ways I use video, let me go in here a little bit, is just when I'm presenting something.
So first of all, psychology.
So I'm just walking them through the syllabus here on the first day. And so there's the syllabus, and I'm just sitting here in the corner talking to them. So this is partly that humanization, but there's also a lot of research, and we were involved in some of this, that says, well, why are you here at all? Like, all they need to do is hear your voice, right? And that's all that matters. Well, the research suggests that's not all that matters. Being able to see me there, flailing my hands around, scrunching my face now and then, who knows what, somehow makes it all a more engaging experience. And we'll see that students will remember videos better if there's a head there talking to them as they go through, and they will be more engaged at the time of viewing. So, So sort of two-pronged answer. You have that general evidence base we can talk about, but for a lot of the specific claims that we're making, there's an evidence base that's much more directly connected to the implementation we're talking about.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Thanks, Steve. I do wonder, is there something about like the belief or trust in the authenticity of the presenter that a student would, or presumably, believe in their professor if they were in a classroom? So do they need to sort of see that in the video themselves? Is that why maybe an instructor's presence is also can be quite useful, or aiding some of these mechanisms or dynamics you were talking about?
So much comes through in our nonverbals, and we don't really realize it. But if I give you an example, let's say you're challenging a friend about something they did, and you think they're going to lie to you about something. As they're telling you stuff, they're saying whatever they're saying. But as they say it, their body is doing certain stuff. And that body communicates a whole lot about what you should think about what you're hearing. And so if I make a claim, and if I seem to have a lot of confidence in my claim as a professor, and I'm saying it in a very organized, structured way, and you can tell that I feel, confident and sure, then you're probably feeling very confident in the knowledge you're getting. Sometimes you'll be saying things and you'll say, the evidence suggests X, but and just seeing your head go back and forth and whatever tells them, oh, let's think about this a little bit differently. And so it really is kind of the spice that goes with the words that you're giving, and it helps you kind of know what that flavor is a little bit. And it seems like we really like that. And I'll give you one example from psychology that's dramatic that you can try if you have any young infants in your home, if you want to. Some people think this is unethical, so I'll let you decide. But infants, when we normally interact with infants, we do a whole lot of exaggerated face stuff, right? The googly gogglies and all this kind of stuff. Hold an infant, have it look at you at some time, and do what we call still face. Make your face totally still, no emotion at all. What you will see is the baby slowly go a little bonkers. They hate it. They will do their thing to get you, and if you stay like that, they will start acting more extremely to kind of get you to engage with them. And if you still act like that way, they will start crying and getting very angry, which is why some people consider it unethical, because this is an approach to make babies cry. But what that tells us is when we have interactions, the nonverbal is the connection. That's where we're actually connecting with that person. And so, yeah, if they have us in a live classroom, of course they're getting that. But when they're not getting us in a live classroom, a lot comes through that. Now, there's the connection, but then there's also kind of connecting to what you said. And Michael and I have a research project that we're about to start with. By the way, ethics is all but done on that one, Michael. Everything's going smooth. So what we're doing there is we're having students engage with some scientific articles, which is something they always find very challenging. They have to summarize and they have to do next steps. But we actually have video of the researcher, the scientist who published that article, talking a little bit about the article, about their motivations, about the subject matter and why they're so interested in it. And so they're not just being the authentic person. They are what I call wearing their geek on their sleeve. They are saying, I think this is really cool. I'm spending my life looking at this specific issue. And that is contagious. Geekiness is contagious. When you see somebody else that finds something interesting, it's a little easier for you to accept that maybe it's interesting. And so now we're hoping that simply by watching that person, that's the humanization element, but also the excitement element, that suddenly they'll be more interested in reading the research, and hopefully we'll be able to understand it at a deeper level and work from it at a deeper level. That's one of the things we expect to be true. We'll let you know after this term how that works.
This is going to be a really fascinating research project, which we'll share more on as it unfolds. So Steve, in our sort of the next 10 minutes, I think what would be really great would be to hear from you some sort of best practices and tips on how, and to give advice to the group on how you might use video in your classroom, whether you're using it synchronously, asynchronously, whether you have a hybrid classroom, whether it's virtual, online only. We've talked a lot about the research evidence and the basis for using video, but what are some key strategies or tips in terms of excellence and good outcomes for the incorporation of video? We'd love to hear some of those from you.
Yeah, of course, asynchronous is a great, again, skill facilitator factor. So, when we have students all over the world, as we all do now, it's really much more convenient for the students if we can make asynchronous video available. It allows everybody to consume the information at their own time. It's not always what we ultimately love, so I always mix asynchronous video. That's usually where my core course content is. And so I'm allowing all the students to access that as it works for them. But I always have 2 hours of office hours that are synchronous every week, plan one for early in the morning, one for late in the afternoon to try to hit the different time zones. And that's our time. And I tell students, this isn't just you come in with a question. This is our chance to gather any of you guys who want to feel the community of a classroom. We'll discuss issues from the course. And I had over 100 people in my first office hour the other day. And it's a select group, but it always tends to be that group that really wants that sort of community feeling. And I think the synchronous sessions are critical for that. So I'm always sure that I have some synchronous sessions. I'm going to do some optional live lectures because we have students on campus. And for those live lectures, I'm going to live stream them so that students who can't physically be there can feel like they're there along with us. And of course, make them available asynchronously. What I will say for asynchronous, I've already told you one of the things that I think is really key. If you can break things into smaller pieces, then that's really good. And especially if those small pieces can be self-contained. One of the powerful strategies you can use with video, and it's very natural for video, is storytelling. By the way, this is also a key to a lot of Indigenous educational principles. So we all want to sort of indigenize our curriculum a little bit, and having videos that kind of tell stories is very natural for an Indigenous student and very powerful for all students. And so literally, that's what I try to do with my 10 to 20 minute stories. I try to come up with some problem at the beginning. Like we just saw, for example, that video on bystander interference. You might say, here's some situation where something happened and there were a bunch of people around and nobody helped. Why is that? And then you can talk a little bit about the data and the theory and then come back to that. And so that by the end, the people have this whole story to connect the learning to. So if you can tell short stories, then you have a really powerful asynchronous thing. And if those can then be interconnected, kind of as you saw with my top hat, with the other learning they're doing, that's a very powerful way to do asynchronous. I say one other weird thing about asynchronous. I'm constantly told, I love your style. And I'm like, what's my style? I don't know if I have a style. But when I try to boil down my style, it's the computer's a person, and I'm talking to that person, and I'm just trying to explain to them something as though I had a student sitting across the desk from me. So I don't try to recreate the lecture room. I don't try to make it some big bombastic thing. I try to make it more like a conversation. And I really find that students seem to resonate to that. They feel like they say, oh, I felt like I got to know you. I enjoyed spending time with you every week and stuff like that, as though I was alive. Well, I was alive, as though I was talking to them in person. So those are a few things I would say, just try to be yourself, try to keep it as comfortable as you can, tell stories, keep it short. Those are all very powerful for asynchronous.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about sort of how video can humanize or sort of foster sort of a greater sense of belonging, or create stronger course community. Can you share any sort of practical tips or ways, strategies even, of how you use video, or how you could use video to really build that stronger sense of identity? Of course, with international students and otherwise, and people off campus, people are still very much dispersed. And so to bring I think that's, imagine, a big focal point of the instructors try and build that. Can video, so I think you think video can do that. Have you got any ideas or strategies on how that can work?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many ways that video can be used in order to kind of bring people together. One of the examples I guess I could give, let's do this concrete example, if I can just pop it up. You don't need to know the details for this. I'm going to just jump in here. This was an activity where students, and these are just YouTube videos I've stolen, it's just to give you the idea, but where students in even a very large, fully online class can start working on oral presentations. So you can ask them to do an oral presentation and save it to their phone. Of course, people hate doing oral presentations live. They're very stressful. But what we do is we give them a nice little rubric here. Let me just open this directly and show it to you. And we say, okay, for now on video, worry about this stuff. Worry about getting an oral presentation down in this sort of way. So notice this rubric doesn't have social pressure. These are going to be recordings, so they can worry instead just about their eye contact, their body language, their poise, enthusiasm, elocution, etc. And they can create a video where they're thinking about these things. And then we can put them into a situation where they see each other's videos and they assess them according to that same rubric that I just showed you. So we can have students literally giving each other advice on, wow, I thought you did this really good. Maybe you might consider doing this. And when we do these sort of activities where we have students interacting with each other, giving each other advice on their work, often in this video kind of content like this, we've done the research that shows that it does make the students feel more connected to their fellow students, even in very large courses, even in fully online courses. So we can actually, have the students interacting and feeling like they're there together, even in situations where they're not. And so that's very powerful. Generally speaking, I would also just harken back to that notion I told you about for the work integrated learning, like those people working with the homeless population. When you do that, and when I charge my class with we can help them, we become more of a we, right? We become more of an entity. It's not you can help them. It's we as a class are going to generate these public service announcements. And then we are going to find the 10 best. And then we are going to share those 10 best with them, and they can decide what to use. But as soon as there's a them, there's a we. And so sometimes by humanizing the them, you're kind of implicitly humanizing the we too, or bringing the we together. And I think that's a very important component as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, this sort of celebrating differences between people and individuals and groups is a key way of building group dynamics. And are you, if I heard you correctly, do you think video has the power to do that, and indeed ought it to be used in that way to really help create a stronger sense of integration?
I keep jumping around from some of these, but yeah. So even these are videos we use for very different purposes, to actually instruct students, for example, on how to give feedback, why should they care, etc. But in these videos, we are careful. See if we can give you a taste of one of these. can jump in a bit here.
Confused, annoyed, frustrated, sad. You might even view your feedback giver like this.
So I'm not actually even giving you the best example here, but we often have characters in here. I'll see if we have a further one here where we try to represent, all races, all backgrounds, all whatever. And just by doing that in the video, you're just showing a sensitivity to this issue without having to verbally say, hey, I think you guys all provide value and you all provide perspective. You just show that in a lot of the imagery that you present. The medium is the message, so to speak. We can get a little Marshall McLuhan on that. But that sort of notion that you can communicate values. And by the way, just by trying to support learning with videos, that's a very Vygotskian concept. So Vygotsky was a big fan of saying, if we really want to help students learn, it's all about helping them reach a little beyond where they are now. And a lot of these instructional videos, that's their role, is to provide that scaffolding that lets that student do a little bit more. And so that's a very, very powerful feature. It empowers the students. If suddenly they go through something and they're like, I can do this now, then that's a very powerful experience for them to have. So yeah, by being representational, by thinking about the values you share, I just talked about indigenizing some of the stuff by having content that is sensitive to Indigenous pedagogy and incorporate some of that. You're making the Indigenous students feel a little more comfortable. So yeah, you can do a lot just by how you create that video that has nothing to do with the actual focus, but can really help the learning context.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Well, we want to give some time for questions, and we will just shortly. But I guess just finally, what would you say to live faculty members, and then for this that goes out recorded, considering using video for the first time in their teaching to increase their sort of confidence in using video?
Yeah. So first step, you're going to have to learn a bit of a dance. There's always a bit of a dance. So for example, for me, just to create a video for my class, I record it, I edit it, I export it, I upload it to YouTube, I post the link. The first time you have to do those things, they are a little bit of a challenge. The second time, they're less. The third time, they're easy. And from then on, it's fine. But you do have to spend a little bit of time just starting to feel proficient in the process of producing and making videos available. But beyond that, I would say listen to your students and interact with your students and be honest with them. Hey, I'm trying to create a really engaging learning thing, and I think this is it. What do you think? They know video well, and they don't mind letting you know things you might try. So let me mention one thing, for example, with video now, we can do things like embed questions right in the video. In fact, there was another site I was going to share really quickly here, which talks about 3 platforms. I think they're free platforms that takes video, but then combines it with something to make it much more interactive. So it could be annotation tools if students are producing videos where they can give feedback to one another on their videos. And there's a number of other tools. You can have quizzes embedded in the video. So as you're watching the video, certain things come up. And I think that combination too of having the engagement quality of a video mixed with active learning embedded in it, this is where we can really go and really take it. And this will become easier and easier as these sorts of tools become available to us. And a lot of them are there now, but they're going to become increasingly available. And I really want to emphasize too, as a sort of, if this is the last formal question, I love to use the video to communicate with them, but I absolutely love asking them to create video. Actually, I'll usually ask them to do whatever they want, but quite often they will choose video. And I find it so collaborative because they seem to naturally choose roles. Who's going to do what? So we have actors in our video, we have the film guy, we have who's going to edit all of these things. So we see this sort of collaborative mentality, and they really get into, creating a script and bringing it to life. It's everything we wish an essay would be, but it isn't. I see with student-driven video content. So I really love continually giving them activities, not necessarily to use video, but to certainly open that up as one of the potential things they can use, and it's one they often kind of run towards.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Well, huge, rich landscape, lots of great insights. We've got 10 minutes left for questions. So I don't know if we've got any to particularly pull out from our chat group, or does anybody perhaps just want to jump in and Ask away.
See, Donna Marie, what tool did they use for that? I'm sorry, I've lost the context. Oh, that was the iMovie. Oh, sorry, that was Ashley. And I see Francis. Feel free to ask other questions, but in terms of trauma-aware pedagogy, also I think it's important to show your body face to establish trust. I mean, that point, that established trust. That's what our nonverbals kind of do. It is really that emotional level of expression. And I'll give you a different kind of weird example, but during the pandemic, I was telling people, rediscover your telephone, because your telephone is there's the words you say, and then there's the grunts and groans and such that you make that seem irrelevant. But it's not irrelevant. And I'll give you my favorite example. If I were saying to Michael, if I were talking to him on the phone and I said, and imagine we were about a year ago, midst of the third wave. And if I said to Michael, I was walking down the path and a bunch of young people came walking right at me and wouldn't let me get by. There was no space to get by them. And if Michael just says, that's all he says, what that tells me is A, he was listening. B, he was kind of playing along. C, he's had the same emotional sort of reaction that I had. He's feeling like, oh my God, that must have been annoying. That's what that says. And so that tells me more that I and Michael are connected than any words he might say. And that's sort of what our body's doing with our squints and when we're looking up at the camera or whatever. We're communicating on that emotional level that goes along with the words and complements the words. And that's why words alone just don't seem to cut it. I see Donna Marie, is Peer Scholar, is it free or has to be paid for? It has to be paid for by the institution. Depending on where you are, we're in a lot of institutions. So it could be that your institution is already one we support. But if you're interested, obviously, this is not meant to be a Peer Scholar promotion thing, but if you're interested, please feel free to come out. How do you manage copyright of the images we use within Peer Scholar? If that's within Peer Scholar, we create the images we use within Peer Scholar, so we have PI.
And on that, for the full stage video library, all the copyright and rights is all already managed. So that's part of the work that's undertaken with the full library. So I would imagine a lot of vendors would provide that service.
I'll also say the thing that maybe you're not supposed to say out loud, but I think I'll say it out loud anyway. For most cases, if you're using things for when it comes to full screen movies or something, I would be a little more worried. But in a lot of cases, if you're using something strictly for educational purposes, then it isn't as much of a worry, but you should still check in with your library, with the copyright office at your library, let them know. Quite often, there are already, I forget what they call all these different levels of copyright, but a lot of video that you would want to use has already been seen as okay to share in an educational context. As long as you're not making money off of it, it's considered okay. But that's, your librarians know that stuff really, really well. Also, what do you do when your tech fails?
That's a great question from Donna Marie.
Teaching moment. I mean, absolutely teaching moment. One of the best things we can model for our students is imperfection and problem solving on the fly. And so things go wrong. You're now in a situation, that's how I think of it. I'm modeling now problem solving. The students are going to be going through their lives and stuff's not going to go right for them. So are you going to be the neurotic professor that's getting all upset and flustered? Or are you going to say, oh, okay, what can we do? Anybody got ideas? Let's go, okay, we're going to do it this way. We're going to do it this way. And oh, look, we got through the other side of it. So the tech fails. I mean, we don't want much of it, but to some extent it humanizes us. It sometimes allows us, by the way, to allow our students to take a foreground where we say, I don't want anybody know what I should be doing here. And then some student says, yes, sir, you should be doing whatever. And it works. And that's great. That's a fantastic little interaction that happened. We just had a student become a supportive member of our class, contribute to our classroom. So I embrace failure of all sorts. It's partly my entrepreneurial spirit. Every failure is an opportunity. There's the famous line from, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose him, the Nelson Mandela, who says, I never lose. I either win or I learn, is his notion. And that's how I feel too. Things go right and I'm winning, or things are going wrong and I'm learning. That's a great way to model for students, I think.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the group? There's some really good ones coming forward.
Yeah.
Either about video, Sage video, which we'll come on to next time, or practices of teaching using video.
Yeah. And on copyright too, with the students, when you're asking the students to produce a video, it's a great opportunity to talk to them about copyright too. About they will often produce a lot of their own content, but you can literally say, hey, if you want to include other content, there's share and share alike things. So Wikipedia content, for example, Wikimedia is stuff they can all use. So you can help them navigate that space of what's appropriate to use content and what's content where you need some sort of permission. And so we're really talking about academic integrity in those contexts. And it's a great opportunity to do that as well. No questions?
So we're coming to the end. Yeah, do shout if you have any other questions. But before I give thanks to Steve, I just wanted to remind people that those who wish to and can register will be able to receive a recording of this video. Oh, we have another question that's just come in.
Yeah, I wondered a question about Top Hat. So Top Hat, I have no, other than probably being their biggest customer with 1,800 students, I have no connection with them directly, but they are a Toronto-based, Waterloo-based ed tech company. If you type Top Hat online, you'll find them. Not a problem. The usual last question: when do we get the recording and the resource list? There you go, Michael. That's for you guys.
Yeah, we will compile that. So Steve and I will share, and we'll get some lists of the websites, but also I think we'll pull out some references, academic references, white papers and otherwise. On Sage actually has one of its own on the efficacy of using video to support teaching and learning, but there are other academic references we're aware of. So Steve, you and I could sort of consolidate those and send those out along with the recording. We will be, this is the first of two video webinars. The next one, looking at a bit more of a deep dive into Sage video, will be next Wednesday at the same time. Hope you can join that, where we'll actually have a librarian from Queen's University talking about their experiences of using Sage video. We'll be talking around how Sage video does many of the things that that Steve has been speaking about today, and how it's been set up to support programs of learning in Canada. So I hope you can register and join us for that. But for now, I just want to offer a big thank you to you all for attending today and helping participate and making it a rich discussion. And a massive thank you to Steve. As ever, Steve, excellent, rich insights and really valuable lessons and tips and strategies for everyone.
And if I may just quickly, let me say, I mentioned that we're doing research with Sage. The reason we're doing that is because we know how seriously they take video and that they really want to get it right and get the use cases right. And so that's why they're such a pleasure to work with. Together, we're kind of doing a lot of that stuff. So fantastic.
Very mutual, and yeah, we're really interested in the outcomes from this research. I think it's really fascinating, and hopefully we'll be able to share that. We will be able to share that much more widely. Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. Wherever you are in Canada, thanks very much for joining, and hopefully see you next week for the second part in this series. But until then, wish you all a very good day. And there's a wonderful video moment to end on.
There you go.
Thank you very much. And
thanks, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Had to make the cameo appearance there.